The rain hammered against the windows of Chapters and Dreams bookstore like an unwelcome visitor demanding entry. Emma Whitmore pressed her palm against the cold glass, watching the storm turn Main Street into a river. At 28, she'd weathered plenty of storms, both literal and metaphorical, but tonight felt different. The letter from the bank crumpled in her back pocket seemed to weigh more than the heavy clouds overhead. "Just hold on a little longer," she whispered to the walls lined with books that had been her sanctuary since childhood. Her grandmother's bookstore was more than a business. It was the heart of Millbrook, a place where stories lived and dreams took flight. Emma couldn't let it die. Not on her watch. The bell above the front door chimed violently as wind and rain swept in along with a tall figure in an expensive coat. Water dripped from his dark hair onto the vintage hardwood floors Emma had spent hours polishing that morning. "We're closed," she called out, not bothering to hide her irritation. The sign clearly said they closed at 8, and it was nearly 9. "I'm sorry. I just need—" The man's voice was deep, cultured, with the hint of an accent she couldn't place. He stepped further inside, seeming to take in the towering bookshelves and cozy reading nooks with genuine appreciation. "This place is incredible." Emma studied him properly now. Tall and lean, with sharp features softened by kind eyes the color of storm clouds. His coat probably cost more than her monthly rent, and his shoes, now tracking mud across her clean floors, were definitely Italian leather. "It's also closed," she repeated, crossing her arms. "There's a hotel 6 blocks down if you're looking for shelter." "Actually, I'm looking for Emma Whitmore. I'm Alexander Thorne." He extended his hand, which Emma ignored. "I'm the architect working on the new development project. I was hoping we could discuss—" "Get out." The words came out sharper than Emma intended, but she didn't care. Alexander Thorne, the man responsible for the soulless shopping complex, threatening to destroy everything she loved about Millbrook. "Get out of my store." Alexander's hand dropped, confusion flickering across his features. "Miss Whitmore, if you'd just let me explain." A tremendous crack of thunder shook the building, and suddenly the lights went out. In the darkness, Emma heard a crash and Alexander's sharp intake of breath. "Don't move," Emma said, fumbling for her phone's flashlight. The pale beam revealed Alexander standing frozen next to her grandmother's antique display case, the one that housed first editions and rare manuscripts. Books lay scattered across the floor, and Emma's heart stopped. When she saw the spine of a 1925 edition of The Great Gatsby bent at an unnatural angle. "I'm so sorry," Alexander said, his voice tight with genuine regret. "I'll pay for the damages, of course, all of them." Emma knelt beside the fallen books, her hands trembling as she assessed the damage. The Fitzgerald was beyond saving, its spine cracked clean through. Beside it lay a signed copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, with a tear down the dust jacket. Together, they were worth more than Emma made in 3 months. "You can't just throw money at everything and make it disappear," she said quietly, cradling the damaged books. "Some things are irreplaceable." "You're right." Alexander knelt beside her, and in the dim light she could see the sincerity in his expression. "But I'd like to try to make this right somehow." Emma looked up at him. This stranger who'd blown into her world like the storm outside, bringing destruction and chaos. But there was something in his eyes, a depth that suggested he understood the weight of irreplaceable things. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care? You're here to tear down half the town anyway." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, still kneeling among the scattered books. "Because I know what it's like to lose something that matters. And because—" He paused, his gaze moving around the bookstore with something that looked almost like longing. "Because places like this are why I became an architect, to create spaces where people can feel at home." The power flickered back on, harsh fluorescent light replacing the intimate glow of her phone. Emma saw Alexander clearly now, the genuine remorse in his expression, the careful way he gathered the damaged books as if they were precious artifacts. "The storm's not letting up," she said finally, surprising herself. "I suppose you can wait until it passes. But we're talking about more than just replacing books, Mr. Thorne. We're talking about the soul of this town." Alexander nodded, settling into one of the worn leather chairs by the fireplace. "Then I'm listening, Ms. Whitmore. Tell me about the soul of Millbrook." As Emma began to speak, she couldn't shake the feeling that this storm had brought more than just rain and wind. It had brought Alexander Thorne into her carefully ordered world, and somehow she suspected nothing would ever be quite the same. 3 days after the storm, Emma arrived at Chapters and Dreams to find Alexander Thorne standing outside her door at 7 in the morning, holding 2 coffee cups and what appeared to be architectural blueprints. "We're not open yet," she said, though her resolve wavered at the rich aroma of coffee. Real coffee, not the instant stuff she'd been surviving on. "I know. I brought breakfast." He held up a bag from Millbrook's Best Bakery. "And an apology. A proper one this time." Emma hesitated, key halfway to the lock. She'd spent the past 3 days researching Alexander Thorne online, expecting to find confirmation of her worst assumptions. Instead, she'd discovered a man who specialized in historic preservation, who'd won awards for sensitively integrating modern structures into old communities. His portfolio was filled with projects that honored the past while embracing the future. 5 minutes, she said, unlocking the door. Alexander followed her inside, setting the coffee and pastries on the counter near the register. He unrolled his blueprints with careful precision, and Emma found herself drawn to the detailed sketches despite herself. "This is what Morrison Development originally wanted," he said, pointing to a generic strip mall design. "And this is what I'm proposing instead." Emma leaned closer, inhaling the scent of his cologne, something woodsy and warm that made her unexpectedly aware of his proximity. The new design was breathtaking, a complex that honored Millbrook's Victorian architecture while providing modern amenities. At the center was a large space marked Community Bookstore. "You redesigned the entire project," she said, studying the intricate details. "This must have taken weeks. I've been working on it since I first saw Millbrook." Alexander's voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "Before I met you, actually. This town deserves better than another soulless shopping center." Emma straightened, putting distance between them. "And you think this will save my bookstore?" "I think it could save the whole town." Alexander rolled up the blueprints, his movements controlled, careful. "But I need local support to sell it to Morrison. I need someone who understands what makes this place special." "You need me to be your token local. I need you to be my partner." The word hung between them, loaded with possibilities Emma wasn't ready to examine. She busied herself arranging the pastries on a plate, her hands unsteady. "Why architecture?" she asked, deflecting. "You could have been anything. Lawyer, doctor, CEO of some tech company." Alexander smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. "My grandfather was a carpenter. He used to say that buildings were just stories waiting to be told. Every beam, every joint, every carefully placed window. They all had meaning." He gestured around the bookstore. "This place tells a beautiful story, Emma. I don't want to be the one who ends it." Something in his voice made Emma look at him more closely. There was pain there, carefully hidden, but not quite buried. "What story did you lose?" she asked gently. Alexander was quiet for so long Emma thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My family's brownstone. In Boston. 5 generations lived there. When my parents died, I had to sell it to pay for my education. By the time I could afford to buy it back, it had been demolished for condos." "I'm sorry," Emma said, and meant it. She understood now the intensity in his eyes when he'd looked around her bookstore, the genuine remorse about the damaged books. He wasn't just an architect. He was someone who understood the weight of irreplaceable things. "That's why I do what I do," Alexander continued, "so other people don't have to lose their stories." They worked together that morning, Alexander helping Emma repair water damage from the storm while she told him about Millbrook's history. He listened intently as she described the traveling performers who used to stay at the inn, the suffragette meetings held in the town hall, the way the whole community had rallied to save the library during the Depression. "Your grandmother sounds remarkable," Alexander said as they organized books that had been displaced by the leak. "She was. She taught me that books aren't just objects, they're doorways. Every story can change someone's life if they're ready to step through." Emma paused, realizing how much she'd revealed. "Sorry. I tend to get carried away. Don't apologize. It's beautiful, the way you see the world." Alexander's hand brushed hers as they both reached for the same book, and Emma felt a jolt of electricity. That had nothing to do with the old wiring. She pulled away quickly, focusing on the book's spine. We should probably get back to work. But as the day wore on, Emma found herself stealing glances at Alexander. She noticed how he handled each book with reverence, how he asked thoughtful questions about the town's residents, how his whole face lit up when he talked about his work. By afternoon, she realized they'd been talking for hours, without her once thinking about the bank notice in her pocket. "I should let you get back to your real job," she said as the sun began to set. "This feels pretty real to me," Alexander replied, and something in his tone made Emma's pulse quicken. "Emma, would you have dinner with me? Not as architect and bookstore owner, just as people who seem to enjoy each other's company?" Emma hesitated. She'd built her life around predictable routines, safe choices, keeping everyone at arm's length. But standing there in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by stories of adventure and romance, she felt something shift inside her chest. "There's a little Italian place on Oak Street," she heard herself say. "Nothing fancy, but Maria makes the best carbonara in 3 counties. Alexander's smile was radiant. "I'd love that." As they walked to dinner together, Emma couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, it was time for her own story to take an unexpected turn. 2 weeks into their unlikely partnership, Emma found herself looking forward to Alexander's morning visits more than she cared to admit. He'd taken to arriving with coffee and fresh ideas, spreading blueprints across her reading tables while she handled the early customers. Their professional relationship had evolved into something deeper, long conversations about dreams and disappointments, shared laughter over inside jokes, and moments of comfortable silence that felt more intimate than words. "I have a confession," Alexander said one Thursday morning as Emma flipped the sign to open. "I've never actually read The Great Gatsby." Emma nearly dropped her coffee. "The book you destroyed was priceless, and you've never even read it." "I was more of a science and math guy growing up. Literature felt intimidating, I suppose." Alexander had the grace to look embarrassed. "My education was very focused on practical subjects." Emma studied his face, noting the vulnerability in his admission. "Well, we can't have that." "Close. Your eyes." "What?" "Close your eyes and trust me." Alexander hesitated for only a moment before complying. Emma guided him deeper into the store, her hand light on his arm, until they stood before her favorite section. "Open them." Alexander opened his eyes to find himself surrounded by floor-to-ceiling shelves of classic literature. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes that danced between them like fairy dust. "This is where the magic happens," Emma said softly. "Pick one. Anyone. I'll read it with you." Alexander's fingers trailed along the spines until he stopped at a familiar title. "This one," he said, pulling out a copy of Jane Eyre. "Excellent choice. Charlotte Bronte doesn't mess around." Emma took the book from his hands, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "We'll start tonight." That evening, they sat in Emma's small apartment above the bookstore, sharing takeout Chinese food and taking turns reading aloud. Alexander's voice was surprisingly expressive, and Emma found herself watching his face as much as following the story. "I am no bird, and no net ensnares me," Alexander read, and something in his inflection made Emma's heart skip. "You understand her," Emma said. "Jane's need for independence, for someone who sees her as an equal." Alexander set the book aside and looked at Emma directly. "Is that what you need? Someone who sees you as an equal?" The question caught Emma off guard. She'd spent so long thinking of herself as the guardian of her grandmother's legacy, the responsible one, the woman who sacrificed her own dreams for duty. When had anyone last asked what she needed? "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never really thought about it." "What did you want to be? Before the bookstore, what were your dreams?" Emma curled deeper into her corner of the couch, pulling a blanket around herself. "A librarian, actually. I had a scholarship to graduate school, a whole plan mapped out. Then Grandma got sick, and someone needed to take care of the store, and you gave it up. It wasn't really a choice. This place is all that's left of her, of our family. I couldn't let it disappear." Alexander moved closer on the couch, close enough that Emma could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. "But what about your dreams? Don't they matter too?" "Dreams are luxuries," Emma said quietly. "Some people don't get to keep them." "Says who?" Alexander's voice was gentle but firm. "Emma, you've created something beautiful here. You've kept stories alive, built a community, touched hundreds of lives. Maybe this is your dream, evolved into something even better than you originally planned." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever framed her sacrifice that way, as a choice. To build rather than settle, to grow rather than shrink. "Alexander?" she whispered, not sure what she wanted to say. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather-light. "You're extraordinary, Emma Whitmore. I hope you know that." The space between them seemed to contract, filled with possibility and want. Emma felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by something stronger than gravity. When their lips met, it was soft at first, tentative, like the first page of a story neither was sure they were ready to write. Then Alexander's hand found the back of her neck, and Emma melted into him, years of careful control dissolving like sugar in rain. He tasted like mint tea and possibility, and when they finally broke apart, Emma felt breathless and alive in a way she'd forgotten was possible. "I should probably go," Alexander murmured against her forehead, though he made no move to leave. "Probably," Emma agreed, her fingers still tangled in his shirt. Instead, he pulled her closer, and they spent the rest of the evening talking and kissing on her couch, sharing stories and touches with the careful reverence of people who'd found something precious and unexpected. Later, as Alexander traced lazy patterns on Emma's arm, she realized she felt different. Not just desired, but seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely worth the risk. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, his voice drowsy with contentment. Emma smiled against his shoulder. "How sometimes the best stories are the ones we never saw coming." The morning Emma found the eviction notice taped to her bookstore door, Alexander was in Boston, meeting with Morrison Development's board. She stared at the legal document through tears, the words 30 days blurring as her worst fears materialized. All their planning, all their hope, it might not be enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Board meeting going well. Can't wait to celebrate with you tonight." Emma's heart clenched. How could she tell him that while he'd been fighting for their future, hers was crumbling? She crumpled the notice and shoved it in her pocket, just as she had with the bank's letter weeks ago. Some battles, she'd learned long ago, were meant to be fought alone. The day passed in a haze of forced normalcy. Emma helped customers, restocked shelves, and answered questions about upcoming events, all while the eviction notice seemed to burn against her hip. When Alexander returned that evening, his face glowing with success, she almost managed to smile. "We did it," he said, sweeping her into his arms right there in the bookstore. "The board approved the new design. Morrison wants to meet with local business owners next week to discuss the transition plan." "That's wonderful," Emma said, and meant it, even as her heart shattered a little more. Alexander pulled back, studying her face with the careful attention she'd come to love and fear in equal measure. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm just tired." "Emma." His voice was gentle but firm. "I know when you're hiding something. What happened?" She wanted to tell him everything about the eviction notice, the mounting debts, the reality that his beautiful plans might be too late to save her. Instead, she pulled away and busied herself closing out the register. "It's late. You should probably head back to your hotel." Alexander didn't move. "Are you pushing me away?" "I'm being practical. You have meetings tomorrow, important ones. You need rest. I need you to talk to me." Alexander stepped closer, and Emma caught his familiar scent, cedar and rain and possibility. "Emma, whatever this is, we can figure it out together." "Can we?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. "Alexander, in 2 months you'll be back in Boston working on your next project. This thing between us, it has an expiration date." Alexander looked as if she'd slapped him. "Is that really what you think? That this is just some temporary diversion?" Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. "Isn't it? You're Alexander Thorne, award-winning architect. I'm small-town Emma, who never even finished graduate school. We're from different worlds." "We're from the same world," Alexander said firmly. "The world of people who care about preserving what matters, who fight for community, who understand that some things are worth more than money." He reached for her hands, but Emma stepped back. "You don't understand. This isn't some romantic novel where love conquers all. I have real problems, real debt, real consequences that your blueprints can't fix." "Then let me help you fix them." "How? By throwing money at everything like you tried to do with the damaged books?" "Some things can't be bought, Alexander. Some of us can't be saved." The words hung between them like a chasm. Alexander's face went carefully blank, the expression Emma was beginning to recognize as his response to pain. "I see," he said quietly. "So this is about money. About me having it and you not." "This is about reality," Emma shot back, hating herself, even as she spoke. "About the fact that we want different things, need different things." "What I need," Alexander said, his voice steady despite the hurt in his eyes, "is someone who trusts me enough to let me be there when things get difficult. What I need is a partner, not someone who makes assumptions about my character based on my bank account." Emma felt tears threatening and turned away. "I think you should go." Alexander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "If that's what you want." Emma listened to his footsteps, the soft chime of the door, the silence that followed. Only then did she allow herself to cry, for the love she was pushing away, for the dreams that seemed forever out of reach, for the woman she might have been if she'd learned to trust in happy endings. The next morning brought no relief, only the harsh reality of facing the eviction alone. Emma sat in her empty bookstore, surrounded by the stories that had sustained her for so long, and wondered if she'd just written the ending to her own. 3 days passed without word from Alexander. Emma threw herself into inventory and bookkeeping, as if organizing her shelves could somehow organize her life. She was pricing rare books for a potential sale when the door chimed. "We're closed for inventory," she called out without looking up. Emma. Alexander's voice stopped her cold. She turned to find him standing by the door, looking exhausted and somehow older than when she'd seen him last. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, "about us being from different worlds." Emma's heart sank. He was here to end things properly, to offer some gracious goodbye before returning to his real life. "You were right," he continued, and Emma felt something vital break inside her chest. "We are from different worlds. I'm from a world where people communicate with each other, where partners support each other through difficulties." His voice grew stronger. "I'm from a world where love means trusting someone enough to be vulnerable with them." Emma stared at him, caught between hope and fear. "But here's what I realized," Alexander said, stepping closer. "I don't want to live in that world without you in it. So if you'll have me, I'd like to learn to live in yours. The world where people shoulder burdens alone, where love means protecting someone from your problems instead of sharing them." "Alexander, I know about the eviction notice, Emma. I've known for 3 days." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "How?" "Because when the person you love disappears behind walls, you find out why." Alexander's voice was gentle now, understanding. "I also know about the bank loans, the property taxes, all of it." "Then, you know why I know why you thought you had to handle this alone. But you don't." Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "Morrison Development wants to buy your building, Emma. They want to relocate the bookstore to the new complex and make you the manager of the entire literary section. Full salary, benefits, and equity stake." Emma stared at the contract, unable to process what she was seeing. "This is too much. I can't accept." "It's not charity," Alexander said firmly. "It's business. You know this community. You understand what readers want, and you have the expertise they need. You'd be doing them a favor." Emma looked up at him, this man who'd somehow seen past her walls to the dreams she'd buried underneath. "Why? Why did you do this?" Alexander smiled, the expression soft and full of love. "Because you taught me that some stories are too important to let end badly, and because I love you, Emma Whitmore. All of you, your strength, your stubbornness, your beautiful heart that puts everyone else first." "I love you too," Emma whispered, the words feeling like coming home. "I was so scared of losing everything that I almost threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." Alexander crossed the space between them and pulled her into his arms. "You're not losing anything. You're just starting a new chapter." As they held each other among the books and dreams of chapters and dreams, Emma realized that sometimes the best stories were the ones where love didn't conquer all. It transformed everything. 6 months later, Emma stood in the grand opening ceremony of the Millbrook Literary Center, watching families explore the expanded children's section, while teenagers discovered graphic novels in the young adult loft. The new space was everything Alexander had promised, modern and efficient while honoring the cozy charm that had made Chapters and Dreams special. "Nervous?" Alexander appeared beside her, handsome in his dark suit, a small velvet box hidden in his jacket pocket. "Excited," Emma corrected, taking his hand, "and grateful." The transition hadn't been seamless. There had been moments of doubt, logistics to work out, and the challenge of expanding from a small bookstore to managing an entire literary center. But Emma had discovered that she was more adaptable than she'd ever imagined, and having Alexander's steady support had made all the difference. "Ms. Whitmore?" A young girl tugged on Emma's dress. "My mom says you have story time here now?" Emma knelt to the girl's level, smiling. "Every Saturday at 2 o'clock. What kind of stories do you like?" "Adventure stories, with brave girls and happy endings." "Those are my favorite, too," Emma said, and meant it. As the evening wound down and the last visitors filtered out, Emma and Alexander found themselves alone in the quiet center. Moonlight streamed through the skylights Alexander had designed, casting everything in silver. "Do you miss it?" Alexander asked, gesturing toward the corner where Emma had recreated her grandmother's reading nook. "The way things were?" Emma considered the question seriously. She missed the simplicity sometimes, the intimate scale of knowing every customer personally. But she didn't miss the constant worry, the loneliness of carrying every burden alone. "I miss some things," she admitted. "But I love what we've built together. It's bigger than what I could have imagined alone." "Speaking of building things together," Alexander said, and Emma's heart began to race as he dropped to one knee. The velvet box opened to reveal a ring that was perfectly Emma, vintage-inspired, but with a modern twist, elegant without being ostentatious. A ring that honored the past while embracing the future. "Emma Whitmore," Alexander said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You taught me that the best stories are the ones we write together. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life helping you turn pages to new adventures?" Emma looked down at this man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who'd helped her save her dreams by teaching her to dream bigger. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Alexander Thorne, I will absolutely marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then stood to kiss her among the books and dreams they'd built together. "I love you," Emma said against his lips. "I love our life, our work, our future." "I love you too," Alexander replied. "And Emma, thank you for teaching me that sometimes the most beautiful buildings are the ones we construct around love." As they held each other in their literary center, their shared dream made real, Emma thought about all the stories she'd read over the years. Stories of adventure and romance, of dreams deferred and found again, of ordinary people who became extraordinary when they found the courage to trust in love. She'd always believed in happy endings for other people, in the pages of books where anything was possible. Now, finally, she believed in them for herself, too. Outside, Millbrook slept peacefully around them, a small town that had found new life without losing its soul. And inside the literary center, surrounded by thousands of stories, Emma and Alexander began planning the most important story of all, their own happily ever after, written together one page at a time. The wedding was held the following spring, in the center's main hall, surrounded by books and friends and the community that had embraced their love story from the beginning. Emma wore her grandmother's pearls and carried a bouquet of peonies, while Alexander's voice shook with emotion as he promised to love her through every chapter their life might hold. And when they danced their first dance as husband and wife, spinning slowly among the shelves that had brought them together, Emma knew that some stories really do have perfect endings, not because everything is easy, but because love makes everything possible. Their story was just beginning,